I've always just had this resentment or this sector always pass everything on to the consumer.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're able to speak a little bit to the plastic levy, because I think that was one where I was like, retailers didn't even think twice. They were just immediately like, oh, you want us to pay a levy? Okay, you need to start paying for plastics, which we had never done before as
Yeah.
consumers. And
Yeah.
then fast forward, what's going on? The price of plastics now, you're
And
paying over 1.50 in some instances for a plastic bag.
yeah.
So, are you able to speak a little bit to that?
Um, I think with that one, I ordinarily that cost was not supposed to go to the consumer.
Welcome to Moving Humanity Forward. My name is Cathy Malejane. You can call me hashtag Curious Cath, because I always have so very many questions. Now, today we want to talk about money, okay? This sector, I think, represents potentially in the billions of pula as far as our economy is concerned right here in Botswana. And so we are speaking today about the retail sector, speaking to retail sector lead from RNB. I've got in our studio today Kefilwe Mokgosi. A very good evening to you, Kefilwe, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Kathy, for having me.
I'm
Pleasure.
excited to have you because we know the retail sector is continuously evolving, just as many sectors around the country. And it's faced quite a number of headwinds in the past as well as currently. And honestly, it really is at the cornerstone of multiple sectors. And there's a bridge there between suppliers and the consumer. It's really always been a critical sector of the economy. I want to believe there is a lot of opportunity available. So, always looking for those loopholes and just spaces and gaps within the market. And that said, though, looking at the current economic climate, there have been supply chain disruptions. I know COVID-19 must have been a nightmare for anybody within that space. There's been changing consumer behaviors. There's been trade wars. There's been, quite a lot that's happened in this space. And I think it would just be nice to have somebody in the sector break a whole bunch of stuff down for us. So let me start with just you giving us the picture of what the retail sector looks like in Botswana currently.
Yeah. So thanks, Kathy. So the retail sector in Botswana really is a broad sector. But for purposes of this discussion, we're obviously going to be touching on the actual retailers, which are the grocers. So those are the shops where you can go and buy your groceries, essentially, as the name says, grocers, right?
Yeah.
You also have your clothing retailers, that where you go and buy your clothing. But the value chain and what makes up this whole sector is a lot. So there's a lot of things that happen before the actual commodity gets into the shops and you go in and buy. So I always say the retail sector is literally that bridge between what suppliers make and what consumers consume, right? So in Botswana, like you mentioned, the size of this sector is huge. It's about 24 billion estimate,
Wow.
the retail sector. And from an employment perspective, this sector employs about 68,000 in the workforce in
Wow.
Botswana alone. And the beauty about it is it's literally only the wholesale and the retail sector, the shops.
Yeah.
So you can imagine now, if you're including your manufacturers, the entire value chain on the upstream side of this value chain, how big this retail sector is in Botswana. And obviously, like you said, like all other sectors, it has faced challenges, year-on-year challenges. But I always like to tell people, like, it's one of the most resilient sectors. I call it a recession-proof
Wow.
sector because we always want to eat. We always need to wear clothing.
Yeah.
Whether it's a downturn in economy or upturn in economy, it's one of the sectors that I think for every economy is very critical and pivotal for not only diversification and also growth.
I like that you've actually sort of answered one of the questions that I had to
Yeah.
say. How is it a critical sector?
Yeah.
And like you said, we're always going to need to eat. We're always going to need clothing. We're
Yep.
always going to need certain things that only this sector can provide for us. But maybe we can just unpack it a little bit more. And then as we go on, I'm always very passionate, Kifila, about your SME, informal sector, you're entrepreneurs. So
Yeah.
I want to know about people who have very small scale,
Mm.
can I say tuck shops, di mausu type
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
I want to talk about upscaling. But for now, just unpack it a little bit for us, and then I want to talk also about the gaps as well.
Yeah. So I think logistically, I think one of the key things about retail. So for me to build as a company or a retailer, to build loyalty, I have to be able to provide consistently every time,
Okay.
right? So logistics, I think, is one of the critical components of the retail sector. It also poses one of the challenges, not only in a Botswana context, in an Africa context.
Oh.
Interesting study was done by CNBC a couple of years back, I think 2 or 3 years back, to say it's actually quicker to ship something from outside Africa than it is within
Within
Africa
Africa.
context. And I think me and you both, occasionally will travel to South Africa. You see the lines and trains of trucks along those. That's money being lost every single time trucks are there. So it means I don't get to have what I want. I don't get to get what I have on the stores. So that's really, really the critical one. Number two, again, we spoke about things are becoming more expensive now.
Yeah, why
It's
is that the
painful.
case, right?
I
I mean,
know. It's so ridiculous. So, let me let me delve deeper into the supply chain disruption, right? I
yeah,
think a lot of the times COVID was definitely a big one,
yeah,
when it did happen. But we did see a recovery post COVID.
okay,
But now I think the biggest challenge that we're facing is, if you really look at the commodity price increases, what's really increasing is your basic commodities, is your maize,
yep,
is your wheat, is your rice,
yep,
is your oil.
yep,
And the countries that actually supplying those things
yeah.
is Ukraine and Russia. So that
So that
war
war,
has tremendous impact in the supply chain disruption.
wow.
So now people would wonder, but we get rice from the Asia markets, right?
Yeah, so how does
So how
Ukraine
is
and
it?
Russia?
Yeah, but think about it. If my basic, let's say, pap at home is going to increase and rice becomes stable, rice becomes an automatic substitute for pap or
Yeah,
wheat.
yeah.
So as a result, the price of rice will always go high, because then you're shifting demand from a particular commodity to another one. So all these four commodities have gone up, I think, about 60 to 70% in the last
Yeah,
two
it's
years.
quite
The
crazy the price
price,
of everything.
just
Just,
your combo,
yeah,
it's doubled in price,
yes, it
literally
has.
from 200 to 400 right now.
Yeah,
And also, in effect, also, it's the prices of every other product that uses those as core ingredients in their manufacturing, in their production. Automatically, by default, because the input costs have gone up, they'll also go up. So that essentially means it becomes even more expensive. The margins become thinner again as a result,
do
because
they really become thinner though? I
they
just had this concept that, you know what, anyway, I should get into the business because these people are making so much money. How was I buying a 2 kg bag of washing powder for like 25, $30 and now it's 50?
I
What?
know, I know. It's a tricky one, because the retail sector, the retail business, is a very tricky one. You've got thousands and thousands of line products.
Yeah.
And within those line products, you'll find that probably the GP will vary across different ones, right? Some will have higher GPs, some will have lower GPs. So the trick is to balance the two.
Yeah.
Some will obviously be your loss lead products, because
Yes.
right now what retailers are
And
not
you need to
doing.
explain that in layman
Okay,
terms. So,
layman's
so
terms.
loss lead, okay, means
Okay.
the product that's gonna call people, right? You're not making much
Yes.
money off it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're not going to make a lot of money from it, but it will result in me buying another product where you're going to make money out of
So
it.
that's how sales work.
That's how retail works.
Okay. So when you see that sale and there are those things, they're like, oh, this is
Yep.
nice and cheap, then they're not really making much profit there. But they know that when you're at the shop buying rice, you're going to buy oil and tomato sauce and A,
Yep.
B, C, D, E, F.
You got it. You got
Okay.
it. So those are the other things that are also affecting the sector as it is. Now we've got trade wars between, oh my God, the global giants. how do you think that's going to impact us? If and the thing about economies is, once one economy does something and they can almost kind of, I'll say, get away with it,
Yeah.
it creates a ripple effect with other economies. They also retaliate. We're going to impose tariffs. We're going to impose. So now it becomes a global thing that ultimately still trickles down to the consumer.
Okay, so we know
Yeah.
the US put on a bunch of
Yeah.
trade tariffs,
Yeah.
and you're saying that has caused a ripple
Ripple
effect,
effect, because the
and Botswana
EU
gets
has
to
done
feel it.
that. Yes, the EU has done that. China's doing it. So all of these, I think it's in CNN or something, where they literally showed the countries how they're responding to the tariffs. So it essentially means the cost of products obviously goes up now, because you're paying 10%, 50% more for what you would have paid ordinarily before. So it still, again, boils down to the challenges that we're facing at the current climate. And I think right now also, there's economic pressures generally. I think let's bring it down back home,
Yeah.
right? We've seen a number of, job losses, and so essentially retail is a volumes game.
Okay.
You need volumes to push.
You need volumes so that you can have cheaper prices, so lower profits, but then push on volume,
Push on
hence
volumes.
make still a good profit.
Yes,
So if you don't
exactly.
have that, then
Things,
you're forced to increase the price because you're selling less.
yes, then it becomes a problem. So you've seen that generally across board, for sales have started to do this, go
Yeah.
down a bit,
Yeah.
purely because of economic pressures. Your disposable income is shrinking.
Yeah.
And it's not helping that things are expensive at the
I
same
was about to
time.
say, and then prices are
So
just crazy, so we can't afford to buy
exactly.
as
So it's almost
much.
like a double punch on the consumer, at the same time. So what we've seen is, now consumers are more sensitive. They're looking for value now.
Yeah.
And there's the mix of basket, it changes. Whereas in the past, I'd buy tastic rice with
Yeah.
all gold.
Yeah. You were
To
like
I'm
just
going
sticking
to,
to the branded things. Now
yes.
you're just like,
Now I'm
look,
gonna,
tomato sauce, okay?
exactly. It's
Give me
sauce.
some rice.
Yeah. It's sauce. That's all that I need,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we're seeing that huge change number, as part of the factors. And also as a result, you want more value. Like I was speaking to a colleague of mine recently to say, we're going to get to a point where these loyalty programs have to start really making sense for
Yeah.
us.
Because right now,
Right now, I don't know why you're selling me this royalty program.
yeah.
So we're getting to a point where it's becoming even more and more of a big thing,
Yeah.
because we really now are looking for value.
Yeah.
For you to draw those volumes into footprints in your store, what else are you giving me outside just your normal goods and services?
I've always
Yeah.
just had this resentment for this sector always pass everything on to the consumer.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're able to speak a little bit to the plastic levy, because I think that was one where I was like, retailers didn't even think twice. They were just immediately like, oh, you want us to pay a levy? Okay, you need to start paying for plastics, which we had never done before as
Yeah.
consumers. And
Yeah.
then fast forward, what's going on? The price of plastics now, you're
And
paying over 1.50 in some instances for a plastic bag.
yeah.
So, are you able to speak a little bit to that?
Um, I think with that one, I ordinarily that cost was not supposed to go to the consumer
Yes,
ish.
because that's the
Yes.
yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like this sector just feels to
It
the
feels like to the
person outside of
layman.
it, feels like anything that
Yeah,
comes along, the time when fuel goes up, oh yeah,
we're
you're right.
increasing.
So it's as if everything just gets passed on to the
Yeah, to the
consumer. Does the
consumer.
retailer really ever feel
But
any of these
they
things?
they do, and I think with that one, I'll almost kind of like also speak for them on the other side, that
Okay.
a lot of these, let's say, price changes that being affected, or like oil prices increasing, etc,
Yeah.
for them to ultimately pass on that to you, they don't just, it doesn't happen overnight. So they have to also, it takes a period of time for the pricing of goods and commodities in store to be increased. So in that period, they are also taking in that extra cost, in that extra. So it's a difficult one for them, in the sense that So it's a balance. It's almost like a balancing scale. If I take in all those costs, margins decrease further, then what do I have to do? Maybe you start letting go of people. Maybe you start. So it's almost like a balancing act in a sense that they have to manage costs within that, because again, retail is a margin business, and every little thing in retail, it contributes significantly. So I think we as a consumer look at it and I'm like, the prices of this thing have gone up, I'm feeling it, or and stuff like that. But if you are dealing with a sector where average margins will be like your zero point 0.4, your 0.7, maybe 1 point something at most, think about how are they catering for their variable costs, the salaries, the utilities, the leases, the ETs. So already the margins are so thin. That is why it almost kind of only makes sense for some of that cost to go to the consumer. And also in their defense, they don't take the full cost and pass it all onto the consumer. They still, as retailers, consume some of that.
I don't know. The
And
14% VAT did not, the prices did not increase by 14% at that point. It's like a couple of years ago.
yeah,
They went up by almost like 50% in a lot of instances. So it's like,
yeah,
oh, you want me to pay extra 14%? Let me just make these ones pay 50. Like, are you sure? We'll talk more
we'll
about
talk
this.
more about that.
But if you want to get your brand heard, right now is the time to do so. If you're looking for a fresh and personal way to reach more people, here's your chance, because we're opening up slots right here. And at about this time, your message could be getting heard next. So whether it's a business, it's an event, or if you're promoting a service, what you need to do is call for more information, and the number to dial is +267 311 4034. Let's make something great happen. This is MHF Podcast on Facebook and Moving Humanity Forward Podcast on LinkedIn, on YouTube, as well as TikTok.
We live in an ever-changing world, a world where we have disruptions in technology, introductions of things such as artificial intelligence, and we can't help but ignore the need for all of us to level up. Leveling up for your own personal development, for you to thrive in your personal life, and also for organizations to continue growing and become the best versions of themselves. In the pursuit of leveling up, we often leave behind the soft skills and focus on the technical that allow us to do our daily duties. The soft skills help us connect with other individuals at a heightened level, and also to be able to know how we relate with each other to produce optimum results. ProLearn comes in as a partner that centers around leadership development courses, technological courses, financial literacy courses, and also mental wellness and being.
Welcome back to Moving Humanity Forward. We're talking the retail sector, and you know what? Kefilwe needs to defend this sector. As far as I'm concerned, the retail sector they just pass on the cost to consumers. And I want to say I saw this when the value added tax went from 12% to 14%. In my mind, it should have just been a 2% increment in prices as far as shops were concerned. But I promise you, a lot of shops increased their prices by up to 50% in certain goods. If you defend your sector, defend your sector.
I don't want to believe that increase happened overnight all at once. So like I mentioned, there are deferred costs, right?
Yeah.
That the retail sector incur.
Yeah.
I think it's easy for a consumer to sit here and say the price of this is going up, but we never really try to understand, where do all these things come from?
Yeah.
How does it all build up?
Yeah.
How does this retailer get this commodity or this product to the shelves and ultimately to me? And like any other businesses, there are costs that you incur, and there's no retailer that's going to say, I'm going to up my prices by 50% overnight. Instantly you're going to lose market share. So a lot of them, they try to cushion the increments over time. Yes, they obviously are increments that goes like with any other commodity. Prices will always go up there, but the changes they happen over time. It wouldn't be an overnight type of thing. And I think I want to just also delve into that by going deeper and explaining just the value chain and how do we get things here.
Yeah.
So there's an what I call the upstream side of the retail value chain, right? So that's your farmers, your manufacturers, and then your distributors, right? So and your large companies that actually deal with that, right? So think about farming just as a simple one, because an ordinary Motswana can be able to relate with this. You have good harvests, you've got bad harvests. And depending on the climatic conditions in that state or the weather, sometimes we have drought, sometimes you never want to have an extreme of any of that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And as a result, that will automatically, depending on how good or bad the harvest is, prices ultimately to get to you either go up or down. So you find that a lot of the times you maybe in a bad harvest or something like that, the prices of your commodity in store will probably double or will decrease. And that's why I always tell even consumer, like, also look at the things where the prices are increasing and the things that are prices are not decreasing, because not all product line prices are going to increase. Some will relatively remain the same over time because the supply chain is relatively the same, and others will obviously go up and down. And the thing about it is most of a consumer's bucket size is your staples, what we call staples. And your staples are so prone to a lot of things. Climate change, it's them. We're talking trade wars, it's them. We're talking any kind of geopolitical tension, it's them. So because a lot of your basket is made out of those few products and services, whether it's a product as its core, or maybe it's a product that has been made by that core one ultimately. So if anything that I mentioned happens on the upstream side, so automatically it will trickle down into the price of the commodity. And a lot of the times you will see in some instances, yes, the price will go up quickly. Some, the price will over time will change. And another thing also that I want us to also consider is the exchange rate effect. So Botswana, we don't really produce much locally, so we depend on our neighboring countries, particularly South Africa,
Yeah.
to get our products. So if the exchange rate happens to fluctuate drastically in a very short space of time, again, that's another thing that we don't take into consideration, that the retailers have to manage that risk. Sometimes that can come at a huge loss to them, right? Eroding quote unquote value in their business, but they still consume or safeguard the consumer from that increased expense. We don't
Yeah,
even
but
get
when
to.
prices go down, I've never heard of a price of a commodity going down and
And
staying
then
down. Like
just
it's a loss leader or a
it
sale.
is
And
true,
you know what I'm saying? Like, and we all know
true.
exchange rates go
Yeah,
up and down. We
yeah,
know prices went up when fuel went up, but fuel went down. I don't recall prices going down.
yeah,
So
yeah. On the downside, it never really
yeah,
translates
they
in
don't. I mean, and right now
over
that for me is
time.
the worrying thing. But anyway, I
Yeah,
think
will turn.
let's move to the value chain, right?
Yeah,
Because I was somewhere at an event and someone said, you know what, that we love buzzwords in Botswana, and I think value chain is a buzzword, but I actually believe there's a lot that can be tapped into if we look at the value chain, especially within the retail sector. And then you've just said something that I think is so important as a nation, because we do not manufacture or grow a lot of our own products.
yeah.
This is a large part of the reason why we have a lot of increment with regards to price of goods and so forth in the retail
Yeah.
sector. So take me through this, and let's start with value chain.
Yeah, yeah. So no, there's no sector that operates in isolation.
Yeah.
I think let's start there,
Yeah.
right? So when we talk value chain, we're literally just talking about all the other, let's say, sectors that support that sector, right? So in the retail space, goods wouldn't just ordinarily land in store. They come from somewhere. Um, so the upstream side of the value chain, that's where the manufacturing takes place. That's where the farming takes place. And then from there, it's the processing side, where you will you'll plant your, let's say, your apples, and then there's going to be somebody's going to make apple juice. So all of these are all interlinked together. And then once all that are now final products that you ultimately buy in store, they are what we call distributors now. So these are companies that make sure that the goods go from the supplier to the retail stores. So that's, I'll call them the middlemen, for lack of a better word. And in Botswana, it's also one of a very large sector, because what they have is, I'd call, they have a buying power, a large buying power, or economies of scale. They're able to, because they are big and they supply to a majority of the retailers, the negotiating power on pricing with the ultimate supplier becomes easier. And therefore, obviously, then on sells into the retailers. So those are the magnitude of logistic companies that we have that sell to that. And then from there, the goods now get into your shelves, where you now, essentially, that we'll call it the downstream side of the retail sector. And then you are able to buy your goods and services.
I would like you to explain shelving a little bit for me. I think it was because of the National
Yeah.
Retail Convention that I got to discover that shelving is a thing. I didn't know
Shelving
that. Like, people pay for shelving,
is
and
a
there's certain shelves that are more expensive because I think that's where the eye line is. I mean, there's a whole art and a science to it. But let's
yeah.
speak to challenges, because you've touched a little bit on some of them. Logistics being obviously the most in our phase one, and
Yeah.
just the supply chain as well. Take me through some of the challenges. I want to imagine capital as well, because you're buying stock and then waiting for it to get bought. So I want to believe capital at some point would might be a challenge.
Yeah. So predominantly, those are the main challenges that in the retail sector you will definitely face. And also there is the recent one is also space, like warehousing.
Uh-huh.
So because we rely a lot on getting, goods from outside, for you to be able to have the goods here fast enough for the consumer to be able to have them, there's a certain level of warehousing and distribution space that you need. And that's why you'll find that the distribution sector, like all other, I think, sectors, or most sectors in the country, is dominated by larger organizations because they have economies of scale. So it's very important to have your warehousing space. So if you're a smaller retailer, those things you don't have. And when you're starting up, you don't even think, maybe I need that, right? But what happens when you run out of water in your store, and you don't have anywhere you can quickly go and grab?
You don't
And
have it in the storeroom, so that means
yes,
then you're
you have to
you're
wait.
negating that thing you
Yeah,
said in the beginning of
exactly.
consistency. I walk into your shop,
Consistency.
I expect to find water. Why are you taking 2 weeks to have water in your shop?
Exactly. And that's where, again, the need for that warehousing space is very important as well. And I was having a conversation again with a colleague of mine to say, I think that's one of the low hanging fruits in the I'll say the real estate sector, where retailers need warehousing. They need where to put their stock so that it can be readily available for consumers. How many times have you gotten in shops and there is no a basic thing that you need?
Yeah.
Yes, so you have to wait for that thing. So it's also a gap that I think needs to be closed just within our sector itself. And then I think this one, I think not so much as a challenge, I think we'll delve into, but there's a lot of, I think, I don't want to say, I don't want to use monopoly, but there's a lot of power held by a number of retailers.
Yeah.
And because they are, I'll call them powerhouses. Every economy has them. Every economy, it's just how the world operates. So the gap between, it's very difficult. Recently, in the retail sector, we've seen where I can get into a wholesale and buy as a retailer, but ideally wholesalers,
We're meant to be
yes,
for
they're
the
servicing large scale,
yeah.
right? And now they operate under certain licenses I think it's called departmental licenses now, where you can actually sell to a retailer. So that's more competition.
To the consumer, not
Yeah,
the
to the consumer.
retailer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yes.
now basically, you are competing with your customer, right?
Yes.
Because you're, as a wholesaler, your
Yes.
customer is supposed to be the retailer. But
Exactly.
now you're also open to the consumer, and thus competing with your
You're
initially.
essentially
Yeah.
taking into their pie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's also another almost kind of like a recently evolving like
Yeah.
phenomenon in the
Yeah.
retail space. Some of the challenges
Is
that
there
we're
something
seeing.
that's going to be done about that? Because that means that you're shrinking the retailer's pie, basically.
I'm not quite sure, hey Kathy. I wish I had the answer to that one,
Yeah.
but I'm not quite sure. I think let's have a look at it. Let's obviously keep a close eye on it.
Yeah.
And see what happens and see how it will go as a sector. But those, I think, are the fundamental challenges that really affect your small retailers
Yeah.
from growing.
Yeah.
And as interesting fact, also just one of those things that I want to drop. Botswana is a unique situation because we almost operate in a modern retail type of way, where you've got malls, you've got your big retailers dominating the market in the sector, right? But when you go up Africa, it's actually the inverse.
Yeah. The
About
smaller
yes, about
retailers are the ones
80,
that
yeah,
normally dominate
they
the
dominate
market.
the market. That is why your bigger retailers struggle in those markets,
Yeah.
because of that. But I guess it's something we'll also
But then,
touch
I
on.
mean, in Botswana, I want to say, and again, this is just very uninformed, but just
Yeah.
watching, I think one of our retail stores, the larger ones, actually went and, can I say, killed all the smaller ones because they would get into a village or a small town and outprice all the family,
Yeah.
because they're using the economies of scale. And then all the family groceries closed up and
Yeah.
went out of business. And then
Yeah.
the prices shot up again. And it's
Yeah.
anyway, so
Yeah.
okay, so that's some of the challenges that we're speaking to. I want to get into the small to micro and medium enterprise, the informal sector, the entrepreneur. Those are the people that I always want us to look to and just touch on as far as economies of scale, how they can or where they can, put their foot in and then scale up. I want to touch a little bit on that.
Yeah.
And also, I think just speaking to the improvement and the advancement of the sector. You mentioned Botswana is operating, different to other parts of the world. I want to speak also, I don't know if AFCFTA will have an impact on the retail sector, because
Yeah.
you've already mentioned this to say trade within Africa, one of the biggest issues is the issue of logistics, and just getting things within Africa is harder
Yeah.
than getting them from outside Africa. So we're going to touch on all of that and more right here on Moving Humanity Forward. Do not go anywhere.
Life comes with surprises. Some good, some not so much.
But whatever happens, you can face it head on. O le sure ka story sa gago.
Assure Wealth gives you more than just insurance. We give you protection for every part of your life, your home, your car, even your travel.
We help businesses stay resilient with commercial covers from theft, fire, public liability, and group covers.
Got a team? We've got you covered too. Life cover, disability, funeral schemes, even income continuation.
Our Tapa funeral plan is just one way to ensure dignity and peace of mind. Fa o nna le mathata a tshoganetso.
Need cover for travel,
Done.
aviation, agriculture, even political riots.
We've got you.
Professional indemnity?
Of course.
At Assure Wealth, we are not just brokers, we are your insurance partners for life.
Insurance that protects what matters. Insurance done right.
Welcome back to Moving Humanity Forward. Before we continue, I want to just send a huge shout out to my clothing sponsor. They have me dolled up all glam this entire month. So I want to say a huge thank you to Funky Rezi. They are actually also sponsors very proudly of our current Miss Botswana 2024-2025. So thank you very much. I'm loving how I'm looking, and I can, comfortably sit next to this corporate woman right here. So thank you very much, Funky Rezi. But Kefilwe, let's get back to some of what I wanted us to touch base on. AFCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, is supposed to facilitate trade between and within Africa, right?
Yeah.
I think immediately one of the challenges comes, you've already mentioned it, that just getting things from within Africa, which is a smaller distance, you'd expect it to cost you less and take you less time. Whereas we see time and again, it's a bit cheaper and quicker to get something from outside of the continent. Also, we've seen our countries, Botswana being one of them, signing and ratifying the AFCFTA, but not necessarily implementing or actioning it. I have questions about that one. I don't know if you're able to speak a little bit to that.
I mean, let's look at other continents, right? Europe would have obviously the EU that is
Yes.
also facilitating that. And so I think the issue with implementation, the agreement, it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's a lot of challenges in terms of facilitating or implementing this, not only logistically, but we are 54 countries with different varieties of cultures
Yeah.
and needs and requirements and language barriers. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration for it to really come into effect and come into play. Government wise, we're all at different growth parts or growth levels as countries. So there's a lot in terms of just facilitating how this can help. But when done right, we see how it can benefit
I
continents.
have questions about that because, I mean, it does. I don't know. Maybe explain this to me. Is it not the bottom line? You have cassava. I want cassava. How much are you selling cassava? Can I buy your cassava? And how do we get it to me?
Yeah.
Why should why or how do those other issues that you mentioned, your culture, your language, don't we have? I mean, we have AI these days. We can translate what we're saying. I mean, or am I just being too
No.
black and white?
I mean, yes, that, but I think there's also a lot of things to consider outside just normal trade businesses, right? And I think that's why it's taken maybe a long time for us to, as a continent, to implement it, because we're really taking into consideration a number of all those things.
Okay.
But on paper, theoretically, it's literally that. It's, I want this commodity, have this commodity, let's just sell it and swap. It works very well.
Yeah.
But the fundamental structural issues we have as a continent, we cannot underestimate the impact that it'll have in ensuring the success of this.
Yeah.
And I think, that is why as a continent we, and economies were working so hard to try and make sure we get there. It's going to be a journey. Definitely, even we're seeing it play out nicely in other continents, but think about it, it took time for them to also get there. They have years and centuries, millennials even, of actually putting these systems together and getting to where they get, where you have even single currencies being used to trade. So it's going to take time eventually. But it's something that I think as a continent signing it is a good start. Yeah.
When do you think we're going to be able to see those?
I think it will be difficult for
5
me
years,
to
10 years, 15.
I think it's made even more difficult by other, let's say, geopolitical tensions that we have worldwide.
Yeah.
So all these, I'd say, disruptions that we have, they will also impact it being able to come into fruition faster than we thought it would. Think about suddenly out of nowhere we had something called COVID that literally halted all economies.
Yeah.
So, and now we've got the geopolitical tensions that are happening all worldwide. so a lot of these things, they then impact, I think, it being implemented faster than it would actually be implemented. And I think that's why it's very difficult to put a timeline, even for our heads of states, to put a timeline in terms
Yeah.
of by this would have been
Yeah.
able to. I mean, I think everyone, you and me included, would want this like yesterday. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on and talk
Yeah.
solutions. We've touched on some of the challenges. You said
Yeah.
warehousing, it can be a silver line. There can be a silver lining in that cloud,
Yeah.
but that is a challenge.
Yeah.
The supply chain is a challenge.
Mm.
Capital can be a challenge starting off. And then
Yep.
I do want to get to our SMME informal sector, just scaling up and what
Yeah.
facilitation is
Yeah.
available. So let's speak to some of the solutions and let's keep it specific to Botswana.
Yeah. I think maybe if we take it down to like your, let's say, startups and SMEs, and how can they also get a piece of the pie, right? At I'd say somewhat a similar advantage as the bigger guys, right? I think firstly, what I've realized is also a key difference between us and African region is we start up. I want to start up as Paza shop as Kefilwe.
Yeah.
And then you, Cathy, want to start your own, and then everybody else starts their own.
We
So
don't really partner
we
very well.
don't partner very well, and I think that's the biggest challenge we have. Hey, and you spoke another point you spoke about was capital. We throughout the year, Metelo raises a lot of money.
Yeah.
And what do? We use it for consumption.
Yeah.
Has it ever maybe occurred to us that can we use that capital, the power to raise capital,
Yeah.
as a consortium, as a partnership, as a group of people, to have multiple of these
Yeah.
in one region? You have buying power when you come as a collective.
Yeah.
You have good negotiating power. You come as a collective, right? And now, because there's so much power that is being harnessed from the unbanked sector now, you already, as a small scale, have more insight than a larger retailer.
Yeah.
In terms of how they operate and what the needs are. I'll give an example. Right now, there's a big retailer that has this massive expansion plans for their smaller stores that penetrate your local townships. They want to double them in 2 years. So you can see the power of the lower segment market and where the money really is in that
And the
unbanked segment.
potential,
The
the
potential,
opportunity for
right?
SMMEs.
Exactly. And also think about it this way: there are some manufacturers and distributors now that they're saying we're actually making more money supplying directly to your smaller scale
Yeah.
than we are going through the bigger channels that
Yeah.
we're used to. And they're literally putting deliberate efforts in place and logistical infrastructure in place to be able to meet your local retailers, right? On your local small shops at their level. And as your upcoming small retailers are like really quick wins you can take advantage of. They can partner with you on branding. They can partner with you on how to teach you about how to manage your business. Even scaling up, like you said, they can partner with you on how to help you to develop that even further. So those are some of the key things that as a startup, think about, consider those things. It's good, yes, to start, but if you go as a collective, you are able to have far more reach, far more growth than just if you're doing it alone.
I think I mentioned shelving earlier,
Yeah.
but I also want to now get you to speak to Kathy's deeply contemplating starting this tuck shop. What is available to facilitate me and how do I scale up? So touch on shelving and then let's get to my SMME.
Yeah. So shelving is a big thing in retail, believe me, where you put your product can help to also grow your sale,
Yeah.
right? So those products that are let's call them the fast moving goods. You want to put them where the eye is. Those necessities, you want to put them where, as I walk into your retailer, I'm seeing them, it's there. And those that, not so much high selling, you want to put them a little bit on the further side. And that is why also, even when you get to a retailer, along those aisles, they always put products that will entice you. You always get that little nibble, even though you know you don't want it, but you're going to get it. So if you think about shelf, also think about it like that in that instance. And we're also getting to a point where consumer preferences are changing, right? So, and that is why even with these large wholesalers, when they were moving towards the, I'll say, the retail strategy, they changed the shifts and the move within the stores for the consumer, so that I can be able, as a retailer or as an individual consumer, to walk in and buy. So purely because you are not going to, as Kathy, want to get into here and everything is stacked up everywhere. There's no coordination. Where am I going to find this? Where am I going to find this? It's very important. Shelving is very important in any retail store. So when you're thinking of putting together a small general dealer, think about how are you going to position. You have to understand which of your products are fast moving, which are the ones that you know, if I put this product next to this one, the chances of somebody taking this and taking this are almost literally
So it's
similar.
your washing powder and fabric softener.
Yes, all those type of things. So yeah, so I think there's one interesting fact also that I found about shelving is also the height, general height of people. Things have to be within reach.
Yeah.
Of that. So also think about it. Also the eye level.
Yeah.
So you want to
I
put
remember
that
hearing about eye level. I'm like, that's a
Yes.
thing.
It's a thing. It's a thing. You want to put those products that are attractive, that are literally at eye level for
Yeah.
someone.
So what is the average height of Botswana? Do you know?
I hope not as short as I am, but I don't think we're a tall country either,
Yeah.
a tall nation either.
Yeah.
So literally, those are the things to take into consideration.
Okay, so let's speak to my tuck shop owner. Let's speak to how they scale up. I'm so vested in this one to say, what is it that I need to do if I have, and in Botswana, I want to think about somebody that already has a stand selling vegetables and they're contemplating just fully on making it a store. Somebody who has that tuck shop, Smosunyana mo lapeng. What are some of the things that I need to think about to scale up? You mentioned already just the power of partnering up. I think that's one of them. But what are some of the things? And what's available? I mean, we have some parastatals in Botswana that are meant to help. What else is available?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of need for business, I think, acumen and business skills and development and teaching, because it's very important to know how to run a business when you start it, just the basics. That's very important. I think, like you're saying, we've got government and parastatals that are tasked to do that. That's number one. And number two, also, if you think of scaling up, look at ways in which you can take advantage of the value chain that you have, right? Some things they seem a bit obvious, but if you are in the same, let's say, a same line and you're all selling the same things, how can you make your product more attractive than the next person? And we're literally thinking about it this way, like now everything comes pre-packed. You've got your, before we used to buy cabbage, now you can have a whole coleslaw bag put in there and doing all those things. And those are some of the ways in which you entice, because you are buying your consumer time, right? So as a small, think about ways of it. How can I, if I'm not, if we're selling the same thing, how can I make it more convenient for a Kathy, for me to be able to get? And those are little hacks that you don't need to go to school for you to have that, number one. And number three is consumers are now looking for somewhere where they can get a variety of things. We're almost moving to, I'll call, a one-stop shop type approach.
Yeah, you want to be able to, like you're saying, get everything.
I want to get everything all at once. So don't just think I'm selling my goods and services, my goods. Think about what other value adds can you add. And there are numerous companies that can partner with you in terms of how you can add more value in your store. I think that's why you saw a rise of ladies selling your airtimes, your etc, your prepaid. But it's more than just that. Now going forward, you can partner with financial institutions to offer banking services. You can be able to, like I said, partner with other manufacturers or suppliers that can literally increase your reach and increase your bandwidth and offer you other things. And I think I'll always go down to say, there is literally, it's proven that if you do this thing and you go at it with a growth mindset and a partnership mindset, you are literally going to be able to go far in the retail sector. It's a volumes game. You need volume. So if as a nation we just maybe leave this mindset of I have to do this on my own, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. You don't have to struggle by yourself in the sector. There are literally avenues that I just mentioned that are there to help you scale up your business. Even from a financial institution perspective, your payment method, your payment solutions that are advancing. Can you be the first one to introduce another payment solution in there? Wallet payments, all of these other organizations are looking for ways in which they can also tap into the retailer, tap into how they can, because there's power in volume, there's power in that. Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that. I mean, this one for me is a big one because
I can
I
see.
really believe that that is a large. I mean, we've seen studies that show us that in order to grow your economy, it's to
Yeah.
capacitate your
smaller.
SMME, your informal sector,
Yeah.
and the entrepreneurs. So that's always my focus a lot of the time.
Yeah.
I want to know in terms of financial literacy, because you started off saying you have to have that business acumen. So financial literacy will play a large part. Is that something that you think is a make or break? And if yes, where do you think people can go? What's the quickest way to get that?
Yeah. I mean, right now with these, let's say financial services, right? When they come in and they offer more than just a product. They'll also help you, teach you how
So a
do you
level of
manage.
mentorship as well.
Yes, how do you manage and how do you do it? Even these big suppliers that are now helping small retailers to scale up and grow up, they also bring that level of literacy and education also in terms of, because it's within their best interest that you grow. When you grow, they also grow. So they'll also bring in that kind of so this financial or business acumen skills, they are literally everywhere outside just relying on the government. The information is there to help them through all these other various channels, because believe me, they have the same interest you have. They will need you to scale up because ultimately they also scale up as well.
I think that about wraps it up, and we definitely want to put the opportunities in front of you and let you know what is available. And I think the retail sector is one that has a lot of potential, has a lot of opportunity, and so we'd love to see you to share your story with us about being in the sector, how you managed to grow if you did, or some of the challenges that you're facing. This has been another exciting episode of Moving Humanity Forward. Let's catch up again next week. My name is Cathy Malejane.